Hi everyone, so I thought I'd give this a go. My first time trying to record a mini tutorial. Hopefully this will work out quite nice. I'm going to do it digitally for now, just because during the day is a bit crazy with homeschooling and the girls being very excited. But all of this is just going to be how to plot out and sketch a rose for this first tutorial, which you can do traditionally with a pencil. With Photoshop, I'm just using your basic airbrush and very small, size 8 on 30% opacity, which you could use a normal pencil size for really. Give myself a nice, just dulled down colour rather than white paper background, so it saves your eyes hurting so much, and a separate layer to obviously work on to begin with. I got a couple of references. References are always brilliant when you're starting out, and I don't tend to always copy the reference exactly nowadays, but of course by all means, if you want to plot out, copy a reference, even scan a picture that you can lightly sort of use a grid and copy exactly whilst you're practicing and learning, go for it. With this, I'm just going to kind of show you what I do for now, just the basics on how to sketch out a rose. So I like to start with the centerpiece. To be honest, I look at the shape here. You can see my little icon there, center bit, the little curl at the middle. I'm kind of looking more at this shape, this one here, but there's a couple of examples there. So I might look at just potting in a few little basic shapes. Nothing too fancy. It's just sort of planning how you want your rose. And some of my designs I do, you can get good photo references, but not everything's going to be perfect to how you want it. So I tend to look at the references just as a guide rather than my actual shape I'm after. There you go, just put a few of the petals in here, start basically building the rose up from the center outward as a rose would bloom that way. That's how I kind of like to work it. And around here. And again, none of this is set in stone how you can do it. This is just how I tend to like to work my roses. I just thought you might find it quite interesting. And you can see this is quite a light pressure brush I'm using, dark enough to see like a pencil, not too hard black. When I paint it up, I'll reduce the opacity down so it doesn't interfere. Okay, now I want to start bringing up some of the bigger leaves here. And when you've got these ones just on the side here, remember there's a solid heart bit to it in the center. It's just they all will furl out from the center ball in here. So I'm going to curl this round, and you've got the little curl, the petals as they come out, don't forget that. And up here. And again, the best thing is looking at your references really to begin with. I've just got used to doing roses now that I can kind of plot them as I go along. But I would highly recommend, especially at the beginning, definitely look at those references as you go. Go outside, take photographs, study how the anatomy, the flowers work. All of this, it really does build towards then your knowledge that, you know, once you keep practicing, keep doing something, it does become a lot easier, and you do find then you can almost just draw these things almost from memory, just with little guides to help remind you. Doesn't mean you'll always be perfect, but you do it towards what you're needing for your image. This is quite just a nice classic set shape. And I might put in that little hidden bit here on this one. Quite like that bit there. And nice here. And this bit comes from out behind the rose and tucks back in here. It's like a little extra petal. A little bit over. Oops. A bit too big. You don't have to be so perfectionist on that. I'm just, you know, being fussy. Okay. This lovely big soft petal. And if you look as it ripples, the slightly larger the petals, the slightly more ripples, and you'll get the little imperfections, little curls and twists is coming out. That just all adds to realism later when you paint it up. Some bits almost look sort of pointy where they curl. You don't always see the curl bit at that point. Just do a little line to represent where the curl's going to be. There. And I'll just add a around here. Oh, that one's quite nice. You can see down here it's sort of tucked just underneath that petal. It adds quite a nice effect. It's quite thin coming out. It's a little flatter where it's lying on top of another petal. There. Just to represent, so you can see the curl bit there. And there's another nice, slightly crinkled. And again, this is just sort of plotting your petals and everything before you even think about colouring in. Just getting the shapes you want. Might put an extra bit in there. It came out quite wide, but that's okay. And then you also get, I've got this nice big one here. You can see it's sort of got a little bit of a break in it as well, because not everything is perfect in nature. Wind and stuff can damage leaves. Little back one there. And I quite like the little ones that just hang down, they're sort of off the shape, like the little first early petals that are now quite crinkled, were the first to start to decay, and they just hang below. Just give it a nice bit of shape there. There we go. A little bit of curl there. And there. And of course you can see sometimes you've got the green little ones that hang, that covered the rose when it was a bud. This one comes down sort of here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have it come out maybe the side. Obviously pull up a reference for this. I'm just going to tuck one in there just for our example. There we go. Maybe another bit here. Okay. Oops, a bit messy there. I'm busy looking at the screen there. There you go. Okay, it's just a little basic outline for you. Whoops, didn't quite press my eraser there properly. And now from this is where you can work your layers on this. Now, obviously, if this was traditional, you would have your sketch, and this is where you'd want to either just gently erase out your original sketch, just leaving it very faint. So in case of Photoshop, I'm going to take my layer and I'm going to reduce its opacity down. Sometimes I go to about 30, so you just about see it there. But it's not too in your face, so you can work underneath it in the layers. Obviously the traditional, you just erase it very lightly so you can just see the original outline, and then you could work your colour up. I'll probably show you another one of those in another video, the way I do it traditionally. With Photoshop though, I will probably give myself a little base colour to begin with. So let's go classic red, or should we go with the pink? No, obviously you got nice classic red. I might go like a red. So, or for this example, maybe go nice. Okay. No, I'm going to go red. I know quite often end up doing red, especially with a lot of the gothic style reds and whites come up quite often. Obviously, again, go with whilst you're learning, go with the references you've got, go for it, enjoy it, whatever colour you like, but have a reference next to you for an example. And then I'm going to increase my brush size, and I usually start with a bit of a solid base layer underneath the light sketch, because when I do a lot of other parts to the image, then I can work underneath that layer and it doesn't tend to interfere with the rose I've already created. So you can basically fill in the background. There's probably much faster ways of doing it, but I don't know, I quite like just taking my time and, you know, just running around there. It lets me think a little while I'm doing this, plan ahead, do the next parts. Again, there's maybe other short, quick ways you could do it and stuff. This is just what I do. I quite enjoy doing this a little bit. Okay, now take your time to get closer to the edges. Try and get that smooth. Let's just fill it in with the one flat colour, just so that you've got your base to work on. Doesn't matter if you go over a little bit, the sketch in the end can either be removed in part or fully. It's just to give you your guideline for when you put new colour into the roses. And I sometimes actually keep some bits in, just because it helps define some of the really nice edges. The outer bits I tend to remove, because I would use a lot of lighter tones on that as the light hits the sort of curves and the very tip bits. Depends what lighting effect you're creating. We're just going for a basic example rose here. Okay, it just takes a little minute. Hope everyone's been doing all right during this lockdown. It's been quite interesting for us with the homeschooling. I'm quite enjoying the homeschooling at the moment. It's exhausting, but it's kind of wonderful as well, getting to see what my girls are doing and help them learn different things. Though getting much time to do anything else is pretty impossible, and it's very loud. Both my girls are still quite young and very outgoing. So, which is great, just also quite tiring at times, especially when you have a chronic fatigue mixed in with other health conditions that I have, which links in another video that I've done earlier. But anyway, that aside, there we go. Okay, there's the base on the rose. Obviously putting the colours for the green in that. So now when I'm doing that, I will layer again underneath this. Just sort of pick a basic green to start with. Might be a bit too bright and stuff, but just to give a little guide to where that is. There you go. And clean up edges again, like I said, afterwards. This is just to get you your bases to get going. Oops. Okay. Obviously, traditionally, like I said, I'll show how you can colour that. You still put in your gentle base colours and stuff. It depends on whether you're doing pencil or paint. But here, pretty much sticking to the same brush. I know there's lots of other brushes, many you can use, but this is the brush I tend to favour. Just the basic airbrush, the soft airbrush. So it allows keep that softness and still reduce down, use a harder edge later. and adjust the opacity. I just find it's nice to control. I flip between other brushes depending on textures I want to create as well, but for the roses I don't mind just sticking to this brush, to be honest. Keeps that certain velvety feel when I start colouring up the petals especially. There we go. Okay. Oops. There we go. So most of all, this is kind of basic Photoshop. If you're still new to Photoshop, learning about layers is fantastic. Remember, I'm self-taught with Photoshop, and there's a lot I don't know. I haven't done an official course, but I make do. And there's loads of shortcuts. My husband's always getting on at me about these shortcuts for this, that, and the other. They probably make things a lot faster, but I'm just so used to doing things a certain way from how I taught myself. But layers are brilliant. You can play with them, you can switch them around, they're fantastic. Anyway, here we go. Okay, back to the rose. Now, what I like to do is plot in slightly darker, some of the shading first so I can see where I'm going. This time I now go over the top of the sketch area. Label your layers, something I'm terrible at forgetting sometimes. They are probably very roughly done. And with this I drop the opacity right down to about 10, and when I'm working in the centre bit I keep the brush quite small just to start it on, very gently with my pressure brush as well. Just start plotting in where the shadow parts would be, and think about which way you want the light to come. On here the light's quite direct because it was from the camera. You have the light coming from the side here. To remind yourself, actually you can make a separate layer, just say lighting, and just give yourself, anything. You can use orange, whatever, just to plot where you want lighting to go, and even just kind of put in to remind yourself some lines of where you want the light direction to be. There you go, so you can go with that, or whatever way you want to put it. That can be sometimes a good reminder. You want to work it that way. Take that off for the moment and go back to my dark red. Okay, so again, sort of plotting in the shadows. I'm going for the real thin crevices at the moment, just round here. And then if you see any little line bits you might have missed, you can work on them. Just sort of defines the shapes a bit clearer. And just think of how the petal's shape is. I mean, if they've taken a photo is great, and you can see, especially if you've got a good photo, you can see these little lines of how the growth is on the petals. If you can get, rather than just get out to actually look at the rose, feel how the petals feel, and you sort of feel the texturing. There's some very gentle lines. Whoops. Except for when my computer does things like that. For some reason it's like a snap to that keeps going, even though I've disabled it. It seems to keep happening. I have no idea why. But yeah, use those lines so when you're working it around, they can help define which direction as well your petals are aiming, especially for the curves in the beginning. I tend to do all these little bits. I know some people might go in with big heavy sort of like just general overshadowing first, and you can with some things, but with this I tend to start this way because it builds up a little bit of texture, defines the edges, and then once you've done this and you start plotting in other bits of the lighting too, you can then go over with an overall shadow, which really sets a nice 3D effect, gets the lighting correct. But you can see sort of building up already just there. go. Some bits are going to be a little bit harder, just very small. That's why you can always come back and add extra later. Now remember, some of these bits aren't open pedal. This is this bit. You can see the line direction actually on the lighting here, camera. And to use that can help, especially give that realism and that bit of texture. As velvety and smooth as roses look, there is a very slight texturing to them. Now, most organic stuff has. So it's very important to try and pay attention to these little details. And it's not necessarily perfect, it's just getting going with some of the shapes. And you can see as it curls around, I'm not forming the lighting fully yet at the angle we want, but just plotting in shape to create that depth as the petals are unfurling from the center. And roses come up a lot in Gothic art. I mean, roses are lovely anyway, you see roses a lot in most flower art, but especially in Gothic, there's lots of things to do with roses. The whole language of roses worth looking up. I can't remember all precisely, but some of them are quite obvious. You've got love, death, rebirth, so it's worth Googling if you're interested. And that can also help when you're trying to create a certain feel, especially when some of your pictures have quite a Gothic or mood you want to portray with them. Thinking about what colour would work, what balances with everything else, and what story you want to tell, because I love trying to put into a story into my work as well. One of my pieces has a lot of roses in. It's called Sorrow for the Lost, and it's the one, if you haven't seen it, go check out my website, SheBlackDragon.com, my Facebook page, SheBlackDragon, and it's called Sorrow for the Lost. It has two ravens, or crows, depends which way you want to look at them, and they're based off the Edgar Allan Poe poem. And I kind of took it the thing of, instead of it's just the one raven he's lost his love, and that I liked the idea of the two souls reuniting, and the one's holding a rose to the other, and they're surrounded by like a heart shape vine growth around them, and also they're standing upon a gravestone. Lots of symbolism going on there, with a little snippet of the poem itself, nameless here forevermore. And it's quite a fun poem, it's worth checking out as well. And again, it's sort of got its own story, as much as it's based and inspired by the poem. It's got its own story, and the two souls reuniting again finally after all this time. And I think trying to put a story to your work where possible really does give that a bit more depth, a bit more life to it. Obviously it depends what you're trying to create. Some pieces are just light fun, but even then you can still put a bit of a story to it. I just posted up on my Facebook page my first full pencil colouring image, because I'm mostly primarily digitally, but I'm quite getting back into my traditional art again lately. And it's just a simple image of a hedgehog, sunny day, spring, blossom falling around it, the hedgehog's woken up and blossoms cascading down onto it. It's a little ladybug on daffodil, and it just gives a little feeling of warmth and happiness, which is a nice thing we all could do with right now with everything going on. And you can still, though, when you look at it, and one of my aunties actually commented on, which was brilliant, it's like a nice little warm meadows day, and you can still see a little story of the hedgehog sort of looking up. You can always make out what it might be thinking with its expression and things like that, and I think all that's quite important when you're doing pictures. Even a simple, just pretty image can have a little bit of a story to it, even if it's very, very simple. It just gives a bit of life to the whole overall picture. Okay, you can see this sort of building up now, a bit of the texturing. What a difference just doing this can make before you start going straight in there with some more intense colour change. And sometimes I find I might work on it with one base colour, and later, because the brilliant thing with layers is you can go back and you can tweak the layer's original colour. If you need it a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, it's quite easy to go in and change that colour. And nice thing with layers, again, you sort of work above and below any other specific layer, and just add little bits if something hasn't quite worked. Or say once you've done the overall image, you may work on one piece here and there and then go, oh, hang on, now I think this might work a bit better, slightly lighter or slightly pinker, or you know, what whichever colour works best for what image you're doing. I'm just going kind of classic red rose here. And just looking again, now this is worth looking at. I haven't gone to this bit so much yet, I've just been plotting in the central pieces, but as I'm getting to that point of doing that, it's worth looking at on the tips, especially with the curled petals, and this one's a good example because it's really curled at the base. You have the little bit of shadowing, a little bit of texturing just here, which I'll just put in a little bit now, and that just really shows the curl. Again, brings in that little bit of realism. Still, while you're doing this, even though you're just kind of plotting the shapes and stuff here, do remember your lighting a little bit. So again, there might be a little shadow here as the curl, but not too much, probably more as you progress around this side, depending on how much it curled and how much you wanted to curl. Again, if you've got a very good reference, you're working straight from a reference and doing a copy, that should be on there for you, unless you're changing the lighting direction. But when you're doing a lot of designs similar to what some of mine are, the lighting direction can make a huge impact on the feel of the image. So sometimes you can't always get an exact reference that works with that lighting you want, so you've got to kind of know how, have a look at how it works in general, the lighting, how some of the curls will change depending on the angle of the lighting, because that's pretty important for keeping it looking like it actually is going in that direction. Okay, so as I was starting there, as you see, this bit similar to this bit here, especially since this would be in the shade area or shadier area. I'm not doing a full underside, I'm doing it kind of from above across with this, so it's not going completely dark, but it will be much shadier than, say, the bits above. So you can see I'm sort of just curling around, and the edge here will be a little bit darker. And same with these little curls here, just put in those little curls, those little imperfections, make it much more realistic. Because not all perfectly smooth, and there's the odd little rips. I'll darken that a little bit more so you can see it a little clearer. And also, as some of the petals overlap, especially with thinking about the direction of light again, just make sure you just touch darken up where there might be a bit of shadow. Now I'll come back over that again later properly, but doing that little bit as you go along now just reminds yourself, okay, don't forget that bit. Yeah. Okay, a little imperfection there. And there's a nice curl here. You see how much more rounded some of those petal edges start to look. And I've still got my original sketch on at the moment. Like I said, you can see how some of that will actually work very well keeping it in there, especially for the darker bits, to keep them nice and crisp and that. Now there's not so much of a curled edge here, a little touch just there, and a tiny bit around here. Especially as you've got the ripples of the slightly older, maybe slightly wind with a curl. A little bit here just because of the shape of it. Now I love roses. Always love roses. They're both scented and non-scented. I just think they're beautiful, and there's so many stories involved with roses, from childhood stories, Beauty and the Beast, and so many just things you could say with roses. I mean, I love a lot of plants, to be honest, and I love growing a lot of plants as well on a side subject. I'm quite interested in certain botanical things as well, which does help with looking at how the shape plants are. Okay. You can see how much that's building up on there. It's a little trickier as it comes into some of the lighter bits. You're not going to see quite as much. So, as you can see, you still see a bit, and there's certain slightly darker bits. I mean, obviously the light is coming from forward there, but even here, make sure certain bits would pick out just to show they are a little deeper. Makes it stand out a bit more. So define those points again, especially where the rose comes back into itself. Yeah. You can see there. Okay, oh, that's, oopsie. I see over excited brush there. Okay, now when you've done that, for now, I quite often get a new layer so as not to accidentally make a mistake over the layer you've done so far. Next bit, and you condense down at the end anyway. Whoops, if I can get it to do it. Now, done that, I might go in with not quite as bright a red, sort of somewhere in between. I'll up the brush. I might do a very gentle over, very gently, lightly do the shadowing over specific areas that you know would be much more shady. Kind of smooths out some of those bits again. And it just gives that a little bit more of the shade in there. And you might have to go back in and pick some of the darker patches out again at the end. There's all sort of a process. You build up, you work the layers to create it. And all art can take a little bit of time. There's a little bit of patience. And it can take a little while when you're really trying to get that realism going. With this tutorial, I'm not going to necessarily take quite as long as I might do sometimes with every detail. I'm giving you a nice quick sort of overview. I say quick, it still takes a little bit of time, but so you get an idea, and then you can work upon it. You can build up those layers, add additional parts. Something to get you going. You see this is still only on 10%. You just sort of build it up. This, when you're working traditionally, you do with the colouring pencils as well, as you kind of work your layers up, though it can be a little bit opposite, because you can't do much light over dark wear with digital, see, and the layers. You do have that a little bit extra to play with. And there you can get quite impacting light over the dark here. Okay, now I'm just going to do those edges a little bit more. And this one. Again, looking at your lighting. A little bit of shadow work underneath, especially those little curls, those little lips, don't forget that. And then looking at the angle, you have a bit more around these edge pieces. This. And a little bit here, just slightly they're going to be drooped down a little bit more compared to the other petals, so they would still have a little bit more shadowing here. And here I'm just going to kind of do an overall bit just here, because this is the inner part, so sometimes not so much example on here, but as they can be a little more shaded. Okay, now then mind yourself with your lighting angle. That's where I might go in with a slightly lighter colour. It's like very gentle pink to almost white. I want too pink. Now keep it very light on here, and this is where I might keep it on, say maybe 25, 26, depending on the size of the petal. And I'll just, on a new layer, using that line technique, just work between the ripples and the bits that might get hit by the light. Just use it to poke out, wiggle it across. You pick out those bits the light might hit. And again, just lightly here. You can come in afterwards with the finer light detail on the edges, but it's just to start picking out those points. Always like when you start putting the light on as well. I think it really starts to pop out and you really start to get that 3D element in the petals. Even just a little bit on that one at the bottom there. Always think that looks nice. Start with the bigger, easier petals, really, to do the line technique first with this. And then I'll reduce down the size of my brush a little bit on these ones. Don't forget, sometimes, just like you have the light hits on the inner bit here in the direction, not too much of that hit, but you might still have a little bit of reflective light, just a little bit, just here, because that little 3D effect, so you got that rounded feel to that centerpiece there. Okay, drop the brush down, 19 for now. Just work your way around. So quite soft at the moment looking. That's okay. There is a lot of softness to roses as well. And then go back over, find some of those edges. Now, it might look like I'm deterring a little bit for some of the light direction. But some of this is just to kind of gain that 3D effect, which I then will put a shadow back over if I've gone too much in certain points, but it helps just lift them, because even with the shadow going back over, there's just that ever so slight hint of lighter compared to other areas of the picture, which just makes it stand out. There we go. And a little bit there. Then again, reduce the brush right down, start picking out a little bit more here. This bit's the tricky bit. This very fine bit. Sometimes better just very lightly do a small amount to come back in a much smaller brush in a moment. Okay, like what I might do now is just pop in another layer, and I might actually even zoom in a bit so I can see. Let's bring this more to, I don't often go pure white, it's usually just slightly off white. I might up it to 15 though, be careful, it can get quite strong here. Just start very gently again, pressing very lightly, don't need to press hard with this. I tend to use the more airbrush style nib as well for my graphic tablet. It's a Wacom Intius 3, if I remember correctly, and I use the sort of, there's a little spring style loaded brush tip, slightly more airbrush style, but I just find I can get some nice softness and real gentle with that, which can really help for certain details. And there's different tip varieties, you find what's most comfortable for you. Just put a little bit of that edge back in, so you lose some of it as you go. That's where you start to grab some of those edges that would hit the light. There we go, use a little line technique again, remembering the shape of the rose petals. Remember, they sort of crisscross each other as they grow in places. And so I'll really pick out some of those edge bits so they stand out. Even some of the curl bits, parts of it will show as you're working your way. And again, if it goes a little too much, don't worry, you can come back with the overall shadow at the end to really pick out the shape that goes back into the shadow. Just allows me to see what I'm doing a bit clearer here as well. And I sort of work my way around, just sort of grabbing those edge pieces, not all of it. If you look, I sort of, again, looking at your lighting, not all the bits will be, but some pieces will hit just ever so slightly, and just trying to grab some of these bits just so you can see them as well and they stand out a bit. Not so much here, just very lightly, sort of cascades. There's a little curl there, it's quite nice. I'll grab a bit of the light there. And sometimes you think if there's any reflective light as well, because that can always be fun to work with. It might be just a little bounce off of something, or just a slight raise in the petal, just like there, that I've just done there. Putting a little bit of light on it really makes it sort of stand out as being raised. And like here, turn away from the shadow bit on the cut, the petal. That really helps make it stand out. You see the difference already. And just on the tops here. I hope you can see sort of like just how it sort of builds up. Yeah, sort of not rushing, just in time, going back over bits. Once you've done some bits, you go, oh, that doesn't really show up much anymore, or that doesn't seem as bright as it should be now I've done those other pieces. We'll go back over them, brighten them up, sort of balance out what would stand out more to other parts. Okay, now on this bit, this is where I might jump up to 20%, and I really will work in like a few of the little glow bits, so just sort of like some gentle lines that get a bit more intense in places, a few little dots. Basically it's the nice little shine pieces. They haven't really got so much of it. You see a little bit here, but you think if you want that really sort of silky sort of effect, which can look good, especially with the overall image, it can stand out against the rest of it. Just helps you pick out certain pieces there. Lets you get those tip bits that would be brighter. A little bit of cascading down there. Look your way around, especially remind yourself maybe which way that lighting was going. It's easy to get carried away as well when you're working around bits, and to forget sometimes, especially when you're concentrating. As you get to these bigger bits, do sort of little wiggly lines and dots, and sort of gentle to stronger in the centre. So get that luminosity on the rose petal. And maybe just a little hint again, sort of here. Way around. Doing the odd slightly brighter dot on occasion really helps. Some of like the shine stands out. Again, it depends on the effect you're going for. This is quite the way I like to do it. It makes it really pop out. Especially then if you've got a lot of darker images or a lot going on as well in your art story, this helps just really give it that appearance of that sort of like silky, textured, luscious sort of like petals. And pick out the little imperfections. Little imperfections are brilliant, adding that of realism. And there you go. Now some of these bits where it's on the bigger petal, again I'm sort of doing the odd dot bit for the nice luminancy. I might go over again with the odd wider, smoother, a bit to balance it out so it's not quite as striking. Okay. Oops, I can forget these. Trickier where there's not much of a lip, just kind of a smooth younger leaf there coming. Ooh, don't like that bit so much, just get rid of that bit. So I'm trying to show you as quickly as I can to get you going on these real digital roses. We're nearly there. Just pick out just a few bits on this one because it is kind of to the side, and the same with this one. It's a little more shadowed, so just a few little points would be nice just to make it stand up. Okay, a little bit of line here. It's a nice big petal, and here a little bit more. And it's building up. Okay, now, whoops, a little bit forgotten on there. Now I'm going to take a step back again. Okay, now this is where you can also have a little play with your layers. Look back to your darker one. Sometimes you can duplicate a layer slightly, like that. See that I can pop that back up a bit. Quite like that. Let's check out this one as well. Drop it down underneath. Underneath the dark layer, just to give it a little bit more tone, the red. I don't know. No, I might take that away. But that's the beauty with the layers. You can sort of play with them. And you can duplicate them to increase them, and you can also erase parts out. Now, this is where I'm going to reduce the opacity back down to 10. With a wider brush, just do it very, very gentle overall on areas of lighting across where I picked out certain parts. Just to sort of take some of the harshness away again. It keeps that lighting underneath that you were creating, but it still stands out. Also lets you smooth some of these bigger petals. You can smooth them down a bit. And the ones where the light hits and it's got a lovely big curl. Okay, you can see the light direction's lost a little bit on here. That's alright. All about a process of building up. So, okay. Put it again. This is where now you can add a bit more in certain spots as you see your light direction. And don't be frightened to go over a few of the dark bits a little quicker. Be just very gentle, just sort of imagine the light just sort of hitting some of it. Yeah. Okay. Now I'll probably go in with, again, sort of darker red. Actually, pretty dark. And again, keeping it at 10, and very gently start to, with the big brush again, start to put in some of those shadows again. But this time with all those extra components in, so you can see quite clearly where you're going, and really think about the lighting direction this time. Even if it means going over some of the bits you've done, that's fine. They still actually will pick out a little bit on there. Just a little bit. There's also a wonderful tool, dodge and burn tool, which can help really pop some of the end bits. Work this on here. Obviously around the edges here. And round the little shadows and curls might be. You don't want to rely just on the dodge and burn, because obviously you might lose some of those extra bits. It can become too intense in places. They just help accentuate some of the parts. Oops, sorry, just hitting me mic there. Okay, now this is where I might condense down my layers. So select all your layers. In this case I'm going to keep in my sketch layer because it's actually blended in quite nicely into the overall sketch. You flick it on and off to check if you want to keep it or not. I think I'm going to keep it. Yeah, condense all your layers, leave the green off. Just condense all the rose part. Oh, actually, sorry. Leave the base off for a second. Merge those layers. Go to layer. Merge the selected layers you had. You can see that. Now, sometimes what can be quite fun is playing with duplicating that. As you can see, it becomes very intense. And with your duplicated layer, you can even reduce down the opacity, and it just sometimes can add a little bit more. You can play with the preview and see a little bit more strength to some of the bits you've worked on. You can flick on and off, see if you like it, if it's too much. Sometimes I'll do it, but just put it on maybe like 30, just to add a little bit extra strength in certain parts to really stand out. And then you merge them down. If you're worried whilst you're practicing, you think, oh, I've done all that work and I don't want to lose that when you start playing with the dodge and burn. Sometimes I will copy that layer and just remove it from sight, just as a backup if anything goes really wrong, including the base. You've kind of got a duplicate of both the base and the top. You want to play with stuff again. Depends on how finicky you're being on stuff, but obviously with beginning on practicing this, that can sometimes be quite helpful, because then if that all ends up a bit raspberries, you can just go, hey, there it is again. Or save where you are. It's always important to remember to save. It's something I keep forgetting to do at times, and you only need a glitch or something to happen to your computer and you're like, oh right, I need to start again from that last save point. Okay, so let's then merge that down onto your base. There you go, for the rose. Now this is where you can have a bit of fun. You can get your tools here. You've got your burn and your dodge. So grab your burn, don't have it too big enough that you're not just picking tiny points. Have the set on shadows. You've got midtones, highlights, shadows, set of shadows, and exposure. 6 is usually fine. I find it just lets you work it up. Now when you go over it to strengthen what you've just done there, you just lift your pen and just go over it again, rather than just, oh, I've just swiped across once and it's only barely done anything. This just allows me more control, because then I can just lift my pen, brush, lift my pen, brush, and increase whatever bits I want as I go, rather than just rely on one quick sweep. Go. Now I'm really trying to pick out especially those bits on the side of the shadows. Go in and get the deep bits as well, don't forget them. If you want to, especially that looks quite nice, the little tear bit. And work over, because it's picking just the shadow part, it's leaving your highlighted work alone, which is great, and allows you just to darken those areas, bring back some of that light focus. Again, there we go. It's quite fun. Again, it can be easy to get carried away with this. Everyone can do it, so just work at it a bit at a time. Okay, now go select your dodge. This you want set on highlights. 6 I find is fine again. Your brush maybe 30. This one you don't want too big to start with. 30 to work on the bigger leaves, and be careful that it really can pick up the highlights fast. So with this, gently just again work on specifically the really light hit areas, like the tips, those nice smooth bits around here, and just build it up. You can see it picking out certain bits. There's other features you can use, like where you can go into image and adjust things like your brightness and levels and that, and they can be really good as well. But I tend to find I like to do this first, because you can hand pick certain bits. You're not just doing the whole image when it comes to trying to do the light focus. This is where also some of the big leaves you can move down. You see some of the red, more striking red picks up, which is quite nice. It hits that light areas nicely. Again, it's very easy to overdo these areas again, and sometimes you do want them quite strong and striking. Depends on the effect you're going for, and the strength of the lighting that you want. A little bit there, just make it stand up a bit more. There you go. You can see that's already picking up quite nicely. This is where you can also work on the stem as well. Now the sketch, as you can see, even the sketch of the stems slightly there, so you can work underneath that for now, just to build up some of the base. So let's get a darker green in there. 10% back onto your airbrush, about 30 just while you're basing some of the tone. Now, some of the stems can get quite woody, which is quite fun, so you can put texture in there, but by working underneath the rows you can be a little bit fluid and quick, not worry if it kind of, you see it goes beyond this point, it won't matter. Go. I just put a bit of base in. Don't forget the shadow, the petal will go across there, and the line that bit. Okay, got a little bit of base. Now drop your brush down. 10's pretty good. Sometimes I might make a new layer just to be safe. Put in a little bit of those lines, those growth lines of the leaves, little veins. I had one from the sketch there. Little creases, just adds a bit of the texture. And sometimes I'll just follow the line of the most shadow part, just to increase it. If I want to go for a really woody sort of stem, I might even put a little bit of gentle line texturing in as well. You don't have to. Some are very smooth. Depends on the kind of rose you're doing. Oopsie, almost forgot that a little bit. Okay, again, little points. Whoops. Oh dear. It's quite late at night I'm doing this. Do apologise, a little bits might be going a little bit off. The eyes tend to get a little bit blurry after a day of the girls. Okay, there we go. And here you can really see it sort of coming together. Jump it up again and a little bit in size. You want to just increase some of the shadow. And don't forget the curl. Again, same with the leaves. The curl will have its own slight shadow in it. It really makes it look like it drops down, which is great. And a little bit of shadowing under here. Don't forget that. And the shape. And that little one, in my case. Okay, now this is where, because I did the sketch all in one, I might jump back up over the rose to put in, again, not quite white, slightly off white. I'll drop this right down to 8 again, 10%. Actually 8 might be a bit small, 10 might be fine. And I'll lightly start to pick out parts of the leaf and the shapes. Remember thinking of how the shapes build up. Again, look at your references, look at the sort of effect and style you're trying to create with your rose. Sometimes mine aren't always perfect to certain shapes, but it's to do with the image and effect I'm trying to create. But definitely look at your references, look at the texturing, and that can really bring out that slightly more realistic look. And with here, I'll pick out where, say if the light was going under the rose, and I might build a little bit of that texturing here. Not too much, again, very lightly. And then I'll jump up a wider brush, keep it on the 10, smooth out where that light might hit here. Zoom out to get a better look. Now I've been doing this a little more zoomed in, and here you go. This is at a nice point. At this point I'll be quite happy. I'll carry on working with other parts that I've been working on, other parts of the vine, roses, and when I've got most of the image plotted in, I would then go back, look over the flowers, look at the lighting, check if anything else needs increased or darkened. You can condense down the leaves and the roses together if you wish. It depends how much you're doing else, whether it's important to keep the layers separate. Just put a little bit more burn on this bit. Jump a little bit of burn onto the leaf area if you want. Ooh. Let's condense the leaf layers. Sorry, merge layers. Put a little bit of burn onto the shadowy bit there and the leaves. There you go. Yeah, so And so as you go through, you can then just tweak, increase some of the levels and the brightness if you want to put some red back in to certain spots if you think they've gone a bit dulled, or certain bits aren't dark enough or aren't bright enough. You can really play with it, but this gives you a good base rose. As a clear, you can see petals and that. Yeah, and take that off. Oh, it's always so bright. That's why I tend to keep that darker layer there as you're working till you get all the other bits in. But there we go. I hope you found this quite interesting. I know it was not quite as short as I thought it would be, but you got to see the whole process of how I'd work on my roses to get them to this point as I work on the rest of the design. I hope you all found this interesting. Support me on Patreon if you'd like, SheBlack Dragon. Become a patron of mine. You can see lots of early previews and sneak peeks and other videos. I also have a YouTube channel for SheBlack Dragon, and my Facebook, and of course my website, SheBlackDragon.com. Love to hear comments, love to see some images you create, whether it be digitally or traditionally. I'll try and see if I can do a traditional video at some point. But like I said, with my girls at the moment, they might join in, but it might not be quite as smooth or easygoing to video. But at least you can get an idea digitally for now for my first tutorial. So thank you again for taking the time to watch this, and happy painting.